Hello and welcome to Overwatch Database. My name is Connor, and today we are on our third episode of Overwatch League 2021 team previews. Today we'll be covering the Dallas Fuel, and I know Brett has a lot of opinions about that team, and of course, as always, I am in the background for this stuff, so I'll let him get started on that.
I do have a lot of opinions about this team because this Dallas Fuel as a franchise the last 3 years has been a disappointment, I think would be a very nice way of putting it. I feel bad for Dallas Fuel fans. I really, really do. Like if you're still a Dallas Fuel fan from season 1 to now, you are very loyal because this team has not lived up to expectations. Going back to season 1, I mean they had XQC, Siegel, all those guys. Who else was on that team, Connor?
So season 1 we had XQC, Custa, Rascal, Siegel, Chipsa, and Coco.
Yeah. They had immense hype coming into that year, and they absolutely did not live up to it. People thought they were going to be top three, maybe the best team in the league. And I've actually seen an interview with Custa, their support player, main support, talking about that, and they actually knew coming into the season they weren't going to be as good as everybody thought they were. But, you're not going to say that, publicly and downplay your team. But I did think that was interesting that they were just so overhyped, and they finished bottom of the table. They were like eighth, ninth, somewhere like that out of the 12 teams. And then it was kind of the same thing in season 2. They had pretty big hype. I wouldn't say like top 3 hype, but they had big hype and expectations, and they did not pan out. They had another disappointing season, did not make the playoffs, and it was just a repeat last year. And it's just been this horrible, vicious cycle of expectations, and just everything they have tried has not worked. So they've been mega hyped all 3 years, and just nothing has really worked out. So I think coming into this year, though, like on paper, this roster looks really good. And if they don't work out this year, then this franchise is just cursed. Like, just pack it up. Don't bother going out and getting talent after this. Like, it's just not going to work. You guys are just never going to win because this roster does have a lot of potential. And I'm not saying, I don't even know if they have to make the overall playoff at the end of the year. I just think that, the way that the season is structured this year, there's 4 tournaments leading up to the playoffs, and you get points for the qualifying matches for the tournaments, and you get points for your placement in the tournaments that go towards the overall season standings at the end. And I think at least if you can just qualify for some of those tournaments and be competitive, middle of the pack, I think that would be a win for them as a franchise and for the fans. But with that said, this team has the potential to break out of the middle of the pack and get higher. So we're going to start with the tank line. And something I have said in the first 2 team previews is I don't like it when there is only 2, roster spots for a certain position on a team. So 2 tanks, 2 DPS, etc. This is, I think, one of the only exceptions.
I think I can see where you're going with this. Is it because they have a bigger tank pool than the previous teams we have talked about?
Well, that is actually one of the reasons, and the second reason is they're just very experienced. I mean, the least experienced one on the tank line is Hanbin, but he has a lot of experience in contenders going back to 2018, and he came in last year, and he was amazing for the Paris Eternal. I mean, he was fantastic, and most notably, his Sigma. His Sigma is I would say top 3 in the league. He is probably the most reactive Sigma in the league, and he was just incredible as a rookie last year. And I don't see him, progressing, especially on a team that's just as or more talented than the last year's Paris team compared to this year's Dallas team. So, and he can cover other roles. He can play Zarya, he can play Diva, he can play Roadhog. His Diva's really good, actually, too. He's actually played Brig in League play, so, I mean, he just is very flexible. And Fearless, everybody really knows the story of Fearless. He was in Contenders, and then he gets called up and plays for the Shanghai Dragons in that inaugural season, and everybody knows about that. They went 0-40, did not win a game. It was kind of the craziest thing I've ever seen in a pro sport ever. Not winning a single match. That was kind of unbelievable. And then he went back down to Contenders, because, you're on an 0-40 team, no one's going to pick you up. And he went back down to Contenders, and he grinded for a year and got another chance to play for the Shanghai Dragons for, I believe, 2 seasons, I believe? Or was it just last year?
So he played for the Dragons in the middle of 2018, then went to Contenders for 2019, then came back to the Dragons in 2020.
Yeah, he was really a big success story for the Overwatch League, comeback success story for the Overwatch League. You know, he played for that 0-40 team, that infamous team, and then he went back down to contenders, grinded, and then when the Dragons retooled the last 2 seasons and actually put together a really good roster, they brought him back and he was fantastic last year. I mean, they finished what, third last year, and he was incredibly good. So that's where with this tank line versus others, I'm not concerned about having only 2 tanks because there's just so much experience and talent. I mean, you know, like Hanbin, Fearless can play a wide range of tanks. He can play Winston, Reinhardt, Orisa, Wrecking Ball. Like, he has a big hero pool. I mean, he's the most notable for Winston. He's a great Winston, but he can play a lot. And, you know, yeah, Hanbin's only been in the league 1 year last year. This will be his second season, but he was phenomenal, and I don't see a big regression there. So this tank line is actually kind of sick. Like, they are really good. So I think that, you know, probably really said what I wanted to about the tank line already. I just think they have a lot of good experience and they're very strong, and that will definitely not bring this team down, I don't think, this year. And then going into the DPS, the first one we'll talk about is Doha. He's been pretty good for the Fuel. Actually, he's been really good. He was the only player from last year's roster that they kept because they completely just got rid of everybody, cleaned house, and brought in all new players. And he's a really, really good DPS. He's more of a specialist. Very, very good Pharah play. He can play Sombra. He can play Echo. He can play Reaper. So a lot of that more niche stuff than like Sparkle and Xe. So then you have Sparkle, and he's a very good flex DPS as well. He came over, well, I believe he came over for the Paris Eternal too. They acquired like 3 players for that team last year, actually, Xe included, I believe. And Sparkle, you know, plays Genji, Tracer, Doomfist, stuff like that, and he was very good last year as well. And then there's Xe, and he is a phenomenal hit scan. McCree, Widow, Hanzo, he'll play Soldier. He's very, very top tier in the hit scan role. So their DPS line is really cracked and will definitely carry this team to victories. Like, even if they do underperform again, I don't see it being in, like, you know, years past where they were like, oh, this team's going to be top 3 and they finish at the bottom. I don't see that happening. I think worst case, you know, if they do underperform, I think this DPS line can carry you to some victories. And I don't really see this team being below middle of the table, even if everything goes wrong. So I think that's good that they don't have that absolute floor. And I mean, you know, Connor, you know, looking at this DPS trio, I mean, I think they have everything covered, you know, roles-wise pretty well.
Oh yeah, you got projectile, you got hit scan, you got basically everything here. You know, you have someone who can do McCree, Soldier, Widow, Hanzo. You know, that's Xe. And you have Sparkle who can do Pharah and Doomfist and Genji and more of that, like projectile and specialist stuff, as you said. And then you also have Doha with Sombra, Pharah, Junk, Echo, Reaper, again another specialist. So I think with Sparkle and Doha being able to trade off between each other, and then Xe maybe staying on without having to be switched out, would be the best option for them.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I think, and you know, I think if you have like a Reaper Mei meta develop, I think you could probably have Doha play the Mei. I think he can play Mei at a pretty good level. So, and because I think we might see that meta at the beginning of the season. I'm not sure. I know there's been a lot of talk that Rush will be the meta. We really don't know. So I think they're covered really good there, and they're a top. I mean, they're really a top tier DPS trio. I really don't see them underperforming that much. So looking at the support line, I don't think it's horrible. Some people have been saying, wow, this team would be good, but their support line's bad. Well, they're not bad. They're just okay. And it's kind of how much can the DPS and tank line make up for that? And I think a lot, honestly, because the support line isn't that bad. You know, you have Fielder. He's been in the league a couple years. He's average. You know, he plays a lot of BAP on Moira Zen. Then you have Rapel. He's a flex support as well. He's actually been in the league a little longer. He's been around for about 3 years. Plays a lot of the same stuff as Fielder. I assume Rapel will be the starting flex support just because he has more experience. And then Jecse is the only main support on the team. He plays Lucio, Mercy, Brig, the, you know, typical main supports. And he's also been around for a number of years too. So, you know, that's the thing with this support line is there's not really a superstar or all-star caliber player in the support line, but like none of them are bad. I'd say they're all league average at least. And I think that that is okay when you have a very good tank line and a good DPS line like they do. I think if you had, any other deficiencies in the team, it would be a problem. But I think in this case that they can kind of make it work. So I'm not really as worried about that or putting too much stock into that as some people are. There's some people that are really putting them really low just because of that support line, and I don't think that's really necessary. And then looking at the heroes they play again, like I don't really see any holes with any meta.
So the thing is with the supports, Rapel and Fielder play the exact same supports. So that could be a good and bad thing because they could sub in for each other if one is not doing as well or something happens, then they need to sub one of the other ones in. And then you have Jecse, which he plays Lucio, Mercy, and Brig, which those are actually really good pairs with the supports that Rapel and Fielder play as well. So you can have a
Yeah, you have a lot of things covered for any meta. I think that if you need a double flex support meta, you have that because you have Fielder and Rapel, and they're both, they're not that bad. They're serviceable. In a normal meta, you'd have I think Jecse and Rapel. I really do think Rapel will start over Fielder just because there's more experience there. You look at the line overall, and even though they aren't top tier supports, they are very experienced, and I think that will be perfectly fine mixed with the rest of the team. So overall, it's an experienced group, but about average really. And then you have the coaches on the team, and I think this is actually what will probably define this team the most is the coaches. Their head coach is Rush. Rush is very highly thought of. I know I've heard that from a lot of people that he is a very fantastic coach. The players like playing for him, and I'm really excited to see him at the helm of a team. He can be the difference with this team from just being middle of the pack or actually punching up higher. And then their assistant coaches, Young and Aid, I don't know too much about. I know a little more about Aid, and I've heard really good things about him too. So I'm actually really excited about this coaching staff. I actually think they have a lot of good pieces in place in the, management area like that. And I think that will bode really well for them. So I'm really happy to see that because I really think coaches don't get talked about enough with these successive teams. You look back at season 1 Boston, and they had Krusty as their coach, and he led them to a very successful first season. And then once he left, Boston has been horrible the last 2 years, and he went over to the San Francisco Shock and immediately won 2 championships. And that Boston team in season 1 was not expected to do well, but they had that perfect stage. They didn't lose a match. I think they went 10-0 in one stage, and it was really, really surprising. He really established himself as, I think, the best coach in the league. And I'm not saying Rush has to live up to those expectations, but I do think he has to bring this team to a higher level than they've reached before. So any few thoughts that you have, Connor, on the whole thing?
overall for this team, I think it's a really good lineup. And as for ranking the Dallas Fuel onto the tier list, like we were talking about before, currently we have the Vancouver Titans in D tier, and we have Gladiators in the A tier. So these two tanks have a better pool than the other teams we've seen before. That you can have more combos with this one. For the supports, it kind of does suck having two players play the exact same thing, but that makes for the perfect sub. So the other person can know
I think
exactly
that's
what they're going
great.
to pair with.
Right, and I think that's great though because we have seen double flex support metas before, and they will be able to cover that.
Exactly. And with the other DPS, you have such a wide range. You have one person who's set on hit scan and then 2 specialists. So you could always have that same hit scan, but you could pair it
And
with
they're all
any of the
really
other
good.
ones. Exactly.
They're
That's
all
why
really
I
good.
think this should be A tier, not B.
Okay, yeah, we were actually talking about this before, and I was gonna put them in B tier. And my reasoning for that was you're newer to the scene, and watching them have such high expectations in season 1, and then just falling flat, and then doing it 2 more years in a row. It naturally leads to worry and concern.
Well, it can lead to worry and concern, but if you have a fresh dump of that team and then the current teammates have such a good history behind them, and
That's
with
true.
the pools they have, they're bound to actually win at this point.
Right, yeah. I mean, and they dumped their whole roster in season 1 for season 2, and then that roster sucked. And then they dumped that roster and did a different roster in season 3, and then that one was not good. So, the only holdover is Doha. But yeah, I think that I guess I do get your argument on paper. This team is really good, and they do. I don't think I did factor this in enough when I was thinking about putting them B tier, which is funny because I'm trying to make a big deal about the coaching in the league being a big difference maker for teams, and I actually didn't really factor that in because I do think they have really good coaches. So yeah, I mean, I feel like this team will be B tier at the start of the season, but I think they're going to get better.
With that said, do you want to leave them B tier? Or do you want to have them start off B tier and then bump them up into A, kind of like we mentioned with the Gladiators, with them starting off into A and maybe getting bumped up into S? Or do you want to just start them off in A?
I think for now, let's leave them in B. I think they really can punch up into A tier, but I think there's just so much history with this franchise failing. It's hard to just immediately put them in such a high, with other teams that are that highly thought of. So I think for now I would leave them B, but something I guess I should mention when we're all done with all these, we're gonna actually do like a last minute like revision and make changes if we feel like there should be. And maybe we'll do that like after week 1. Maybe we'll do some like week 1 tier list thing where we just overreact to all the first week games or something. I don't know. But yeah, I think for now B is a good place for them.
So in our next episode, what team are we going to be covering?
So our next episode, we will be doing the Hangzhou Spark preview, which is another very intriguing team, just because they have so many players on that roster. I don't know how they're gonna like integrate everybody, so that will be very interesting.
Yeah, I actually checked out that roster when you told me to earlier, and oh my god, they have, what was that, like 10 players? Something like that?
I think it's like 11. I want to say it's 11.
It's a lot. It's a lot for a team. It's almost two teams.
It essentially is. Actually, they might have picked up another one. They might have 12. They might actually have enough to field 2 whole teams, which I think is more than anybody else.
Thank you for watching the 3rd episode of the Overwatch League 2021 team previews, today being the Dallas Fuel. If you have any input about the team, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell icon to get notified when we have a new upload. And thanks for watching.